Hi, everybody. Uh, Good morning from Kinshasa. Kinshasa is the capital city of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is right in the heart of Africa. And it is where we have been living for a little over 5 years. Um, my name is Jonathan DeYoung, and we live here with my wife, Nicole, of almost 14 years, and our 5 kids. Noah just turned 11, and then every 2 years or so, we had another kid, Quentin, Wyatt, Otis, and then 2 years ago, we had a baby girl named Arya. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you a little bit about our missionary journey. It has been a really interesting journey, and it also has just been a really interesting week. Initially, I wasn't going to talk about the week, but then how could I not? And you'll see why. But let's get back to who we are here with. So we are missionaries with an organization called Mission Aviation Fellowship, and it's 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 a long-time missionary organization. However, it is not your traditional missionary organization. So we are a group of aviation enthusiasts, experts, fanatics, pilots, mechanics, and so forth that love the Lord and want to use our skills for the furtherance of his kingdom. Um, Mission Aviation Fellowship's vision and mission is to share the love of Jesus Christ using aviation to bring help, hope, and healing to the most isolated communities so that they can be spiritually and physically transformed. So how do technicians, pilots and mechanics, end up in all these remote places of the world? And so it's a long history back to right after Second World War, where a couple of uh, army guys that flew in the Air Force and fought in the war got together and said, after we did that, we'd really love to use our skills and go support missions and help the missionaries go in and out of their villages, build airstrips, bring connection to those communities, and support the work that is going on. So it's been going on for quite some time, and it's quite exciting. Um, Trying to bring technology and aviation to these very remote parts of the world where there is no aviation infrastructure and so on, has its challenges, as you may imagine. So in DRC, MEF has been here almost 50 years, a little over 50 years, actually. And we've been doing this in connecting missionary groups in the interior of the country. So it's a very large country, about a third of the size of the US. And if you had the opportunity to put all the roads in all of Congo together, you would be able to go across the country just one time, which is about 1,200 miles. And that's all the road that there is in the country. However, there are major cities in different locations, with very poor connection. And obviously, the second largest rainforest in the world is here, along with the second largest river, the Congo River, and out in the forest, about everywhere, all are a whole bunch of villages and unreached groups. So MEF is still very much serving its purpose here by flying to these isolated communities. And back in the 70s and 80s, this was really a missionary hotspot. So it was really, let's say, missionary trendy to come here and to bring the gospel and work in the villages in Africa and in the Congo. And through some instability, there were several major political turnovers that came with rioting and upset and waves of violence coming across over the course of 10 years in the 90s, even going into the early 2000s. A lot of missionaries decided to leave. And so the vision for MEF changed a little bit in the sense that what we used to do is there were about 1,000 missionary families spread around the country, and we'd fly them and their kids to the boarding school and bring them to the city to get supplies and, help their medical transport and things like that. So after they left, the Lord had a purpose with MAF and wanted to continue the work of MAF. However, it was going to look different than it always has. And so we joined MAF in 2012. No, that's not true. 2015. And after we did support language school 1 year in France to learn French language, because it's one of probably the main language used for government. However, there are over 200 languages spread around the country, and there are 5 official languages. Here in the city, we speak French, and then the secondary language that would be used is Lingala. So it's very typical for anybody here to speak at least those 2, but most likely they're speaking between 5 and 7 different languages, depending on where they're from and how long they've lived in the city. So ever since most of the missionaries left, things have had to change, and MAF has had to adapt as an organization as well. We have to start thinking about what does it look like now when we have a country that doesn't have missionaries. It has a bunch of airstrips that were built by the missionaries. What we really are trying to do is we're really trying to engage the church to send missionaries out to these locations. And for many years, there was there was kind of a challenge to try and engage the church and find the funding. And, it's a whole different funding structure for them. They don't have the money to charter a plane, and our whole funding structure through the US was either off of support, but then also the missionaries would all contribute to the cost of the flight, although the pilots and mechanics and all that, we are all self-supported. But that funding model worked really well with missionaries having Western financial support. But now, of course, when we're talking about the national church, we're really looking at how can we support them in what they're doing by raising funds on our own and doing a bunch of fundraising in the US and in the West to help connect them with the ministry in an interior location. So it's been quite a journey, and I think that the reason why I share this with you right off the bat is because that's been a true encouragement for us as we've come in, and we've been here for 5 years, to see the ministry develop and adapt to a changing world, a world where now, even if I go to some very, very remote places, teenagers are still carrying cell phones and all want to have my WhatsApp phone number, and maybe they have to walk 5 or 10 kilometers to the next village where there's a cell tower, and they'll be able to send me a message once a month or so saying hi. Where they understand technology, they understand what's happening in the big cities. Most people are flocking to the big cities. They all think that's where prosperity and the jobs are and work is, and everybody has lots of money. And the reality is quite different. Kinshasa is a very big city, about 14, maybe 15, some say 16 million people in the city with very, very poor infrastructure. So it's a real challenge to live here. Education is expensive. It's not free, and even when you do pay for it, the quality is very low. And then once you do graduate, it's very difficult to find a job. So the poverty and the struggles just continue, and they're here. But certainly, MAF is interested in connecting isolated communities with the gospel. And sharing the love of Jesus in those areas. And so that's why we're here. What does that look like for us as part of our experiences? Living in a huge city that has just been booming with population growth for the last 15, 20 years. But without major infrastructure, it's tough. We have homes that for 5 years lived in a home that we had power, 10 to 12 hours a day, primarily at night. And so we didn't have water. So we had to haul in all our own water, and we conserved quite a bit. You have all kinds of challenges moving around the city. Traffic is terrible. Prices are extremely inflated. There are now more and more grocery stores, but it's really expensive to get what you need to get around this city. And there's also a huge dichotomy between the rich and the poor, and there's really no middle class, which is really interesting. So because it's a developing world, and Congo is probably one of the richest nations in the world as far as it comes to natural resources, it's highly contested in the international world as far as development projects go. The US has a huge development project. Russia is interested in the natural resources. China has huge interest in natural resources and the mining. And so as far as the international level, there are lots and lots of non-governmental organizations working here, development agencies, still at work in somewhat of a struggle to kind of win the most influence over the current government to see what we can get out of it. And so as far as the downtown area goes, there's tons and tons of international workers, government agencies, embassies that are all here and have lots and lots of money. And then as soon as you move out of the city and come closer to our neighborhood and just beyond, you're moving into some of the poorest neighborhoods and some of the pretty challenging slums that you've may have seen pictures of. So it's very dichotomous worlds. Just outside of our window, people are taking transport buses to go to and from work, heading in and out of the city each and every day, trying to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours, getting stuck in traffic just to make a day's wage. And of course, with Congo being one of the most corrupt countries in the world, it's very difficult to advance. There are a lot of government agencies that all feel like they have a claim on your taxes and your income. And so as soon as you start showing signs of having a great idea or developing a good business model or starting to be somewhat successful in trying to develop your future and doing what's best for your family, there's either government agencies that come descending on you, or your family from the village will send all their kids to your house because you now have the means to school their kids and pay for them. So between government and family, it's really difficult to get ahead, and it's also quite discouraging for people that try to and have the mindset of trying to get themselves a little bit further in this world, but it just is not really encouraged. And as soon as someone does well, they're typically taken advantage of by either through the cultural norms of value on family, or the government and the corruption that can take at will. So it's certainly very, very discouraging at times to see the lack of development over the years. And similar to that, the road system has also not developed, and so the need for aviation, mission aviation, is continually increasing. We of course live in the city. This is where we live and go to church and have we have some workers here at the house, and so we're very well connected here. But our ministry focus is really connecting the interior and supporting the different missionaries out there. So MAF has done a really nice job of trying to focus on 5 different areas. And like I said, these are really exciting for us because when we first came, it felt like maybe they were really trying hard still to adapt to the changing missionary world. But with these focus areas, we're really able to hone in on how to spend our time wisely, because when the needs are great, it's really hard to figure out which need to meet at what time. And so a good strategy and lots of prayer and can really help determine that. So here's 5 areas that MF focuses on. We call them the 5 S's. So first area would be searching for new disciples. Second area would be supporting followers and disciple makers. Third area, strengthening the capacity and talent of our national staff. Fourth area is serving core needs of people. And finally, the stewarding of creation. And those 5 areas really help us focus on filtering the work that we do, because there are quite a few flights that we can do just to help people, and it's pretty easy to put to make the shoe fit that every flight you're doing is helping, but we really are trying to find those objectives where this is where we can invest our time most specifically and have the greatest impact. And so it's been a challenge to try and fit that over the years, but it's also been very encouraging to move in that direction. So this week specifically, we had kind of a huge win. We kind of had a major celebration. We opened an airstrip in a place called Jongh, which is a smaller village outside of a bigger village that is still about 50, 60 kilometers away from a bigger city. And there's a Bible school project that's going on there. We had some missionaries that were going up there several times a year to support the biblical education of a group of about 40 pastors in the area that are getting together and want to know more about the Bible so that they can share that in their community. So they're getting together, several times a year. All the pastors are coming from the different communities, and then they're bringing in Bible teachers to encourage them, support them, train them up. A very difficult place to get to. You can fly to the big city, and then after that you get in a Jeep, and apparently there's 2 roads to get there. The first road is now completely washed out, and the second road is only usable in dry season. So and it's just north of the equator, so I mean it's 2 to 3 months where this road is open and the rest of the time it's flooded. So we've been trying to get, or the missionary made the request that back in the day, more than 30 years ago, there was an airstrip in the village that was usable. So he came to us and asked, is there any way we can open it? It's quite a bit of work, and it usually takes a whole community to get that going. And we've been working on this for almost a year and a half. Every time he goes up there, he sends us reports. There's no cell coverage. We're talking, he's calling us on the sat phone to let us know what he's seeing. So finally we decided, we have to kind of go see on our own. We tried to send one of our pilots back in September, but there was a major fuel crisis, so no commercial flights, and even MAF was struggling to get flights off the ground until more fuel came in. So we had to delay that. And then this last Saturday, we were able to send one of our guys up, flew to the major city with all the traditional delays and excitement of flying a commercial airline in Congo. And then he got in a Jeep, spent 4 hours driving, and said it was pretty rough. These are quite unpleasant drives. You take these Land Cruisers out into the middle of nowhere and kind of hope you don't get stuck. And so these are really these are not very fun drives for people, quite dangerous as well. And so he was on location there about Sunday afternoon, and he saw the airstrip and what had been done, and he was a little bit discouraged and said, I'm not really sure it's happening. So him and I are communicating quite a bit, because I was supposed to go up maybe Tuesday afternoon, land there, spend the night, and then we would fly back on Wednesday if everything was good. So he's really discouraged. But he started talking to the community on Monday morning, and the community was totally committed to getting this thing open and done. And so in the morning when he called me, he said, I got about 25 guys here. About 2 hours later, he had about 100 people. He said by noon, he had about 100 extra women. I'll call them mamas. All the mamas were coming, and they were carrying in termite mounds that we were crumbling to bits on the airstrip. And so he had about 100 women carrying termite mounds. They were engaging the community kids. They were coming. And so by the evening, he said, there was just an incredible amount of work that was done. And so he was starting to be quite positive. However, the airstrip is a little bit soft. I'm not trying to get too technical. Very soft, which, means you can't accelerate. We're in the middle of the forest. There are trees all around. If you can't accelerate, you can't fly, you can't climb out. And trees and airplanes don't mix that well. So they really had to find a creative solution to get the airstrip compacted down. And of course, they had one Jeep, which doesn't do a whole lot for you. So they had to come up with a creative solution. So they bought barrels, filled them with water, and they were just running these big old fuel barrels down the airstrip. He didn't get them till late Monday. He said, I'll call you on Tuesday and let you know if it's compacting okay or not. I said, great. I'll be out flying Tuesday morning. If it's going well, what I'll do is Tuesday afternoon, I'll get going, and I'll come towards you and see, how far I make it. And then I'll be there Wednesday. So in the meantime, he has one phone, a sat phone, and we're not able to call that sat phone unless it's on and, perfectly aligned with the satellites. And it's kind of a mess if you've ever tried to use a sat phone. It's really good for making phone calls out. It's not so great for, it's not something you can just turn on, leave in your pocket, and it will ring. It just doesn't work like that. So communication was one way. So I go flying Tuesday morning. We had a medevac, so somebody had a stroke interior. There's no capacity to deal with that, so we load him in a plane. I bring him back, but there was just delay after delay. I wasn't able to get off. It's taken forever to get the passengers to the plane. Then they decided, oh, there was a change in his condition. We need a stretcher. So we're getting out, we're getting the stretcher ready. Anyway, it was huge delays. So I'm not done with my flight until many hours past when I was supposed to be done with the flight. And in the meantime, Stephen, our coworker who was interior, had called and said, no, everything's looking good. You can just come. And we had the 10 o'clock deadline, because if it wasn't good by 10, what he had to do is he would have had to get back in the Jeep, go back to the city to take a commercial flight out the next day. As I'm flying back from my flight, I have some issues with the alternator charging system. And we've had these issues before. And so I'm messaging back and forth with the mechanic, and we decide, we have to fix this problem before. Mechanic looks in inventory and says, we don't have the parts to fix it. So the plane's grounded. So this is the morning. If I had been able to communicate with Stephen, the whole thing would have been called off. But Stephen didn't turn his phone back on all afternoon. And so he's stuck in the village, and our plane is broken. We have no means to go get him, and we're not going to be able to open airstrip. So we get back and we decide, here's what we need to do. We're just going to, he's stuck there anyway. Let's just try and look at it. So we look at, the whole system from start to finish to see if there's anything else we can fix on it. Mechanic decides, we can replace this one part and give it a shot. So we do that. Late in the afternoon, I decide, I already had my bag packed, and said, okay, I'm just going to go and I'm going to overnight at my first stop, and then I'll make it there tomorrow morning. And let's say the plane doesn't behave the way it should, I'll turn around and I'll come back. It wasn't a safety of flight thing, so much as we just can't fly for long periods of time. It's a 5-hour flight from Kinshasa to where the village is. So I launch, I'm going for about an hour, and I have the same issue. I have to turn around, I go home. So we're in a creek, or what do they say? You're up a creek without a paddle. We got a guy stuck, about 450 miles interior in a village. He's already sent the Jeep on, so he's now, committed to being there for another 3 days. And our plane's broken. So, and in the meantime, we got people praying left and right for this airstrip to open. The community is fully engaged. They just keep working. They've all been committed to getting this airstrip open. And meanwhile, the missionaries doing his trainings all day long at the Bible school. They're praying for the plane to come. They've been wanting the plane to come. Hasn't been there in 35 years. Meanwhile, all of us tech guys are messaging whoever we can, saying we need to be praying for this situation. We don't really understand why there just seems to be problem after problem. And we're just constantly bringing every issue to the Lord in prayer. Wednesday morning, we decide, we should just try and see if there's any other things that we can replace. So we work on the airplane for 3 to 4 hours. Additional issues pop up. it's just one roadblock after another. And now our national staff starts to get engaged, and they're feeling like, you know what, there's opposition here. Someone really doesn't want us to open this airstrip, and so they're getting together and praying. And just as the whole process is going along, people are engaging others and getting engaged in prayer for this whole thing. We think we solve the problem. We get ready to go. I have another issue. Mechanic has to come out, solves this, completely unrelated, fixes it, another 30-minute delay. Finally I launch. And everything's going great. And we're all just kind of praying through this whole thing, going, Lord, you know, if you wanted this to happen, then it's up to you. You're going to make it happen. There's very little that we can do. If it was up to us, you know, and if I would have had the opportunity to talk to Stephen Interior, the whole thing would have already been canceled. But it seems like now is when you really want me to do it. And so I'm flying out. I fly out. Great weather day, fantastic. And get to the airship about 4:30. We do our tests and communicate and land and open the airstrip. And people are just out of their mind excited. We had a big old time of prayer. We had the whole village surrounding. Other villages from around came. They heard the airplane fly over. They knew something was coming, you know, in the coming days. And so they were all ready. So we had thousands and thousands of people around the airstrip. And then just overwhelming joy that we could open this place. So spend the night in the mud huts of Africa, quite an experience. Hearing from the pastors the value of what it means to have an MAF airplane there, connecting the community with Kinshasa, and the ability now to send pastors and teachers down to their Bible school. And so it really was incredible. We're all swapping stories about why, you know, what has been happening throughout the week. And it was just so obvious that you could see the hand of God in how to open a community airstrip. I was frustrated at the time. Nothing was going right. Nothing was going the way it was supposed to. Communication was bad because I felt like we didn't have our communication correctly. I felt like now, you know, I had a guy out in the community on his own who should have been back. You know, he's spending time away from his family, and it's tough conditions out there. And then so I was frustrated how much of that is on us. And then in the end, you realize God wanted to open an airstrip, and God wanted to encourage that community, and God wants to use this particular Bible school to impact a greater area around there, and MAF gets to be a part of that. And we're in the spiritual battle for the souls of those people up there. And so that was extremely encouraging, talking to the missionary that's decided to engage that community, and how they initially weren't going to open the project there. They didn't have time, but they really felt that there was this extra hunger for the Word of God. And there were these pastors that are really starting to engage them directly, and trying to organize and take initiative on their own. And so he decided, okay, you know what, we'll invest our energy over there. And then the airstrip, and hearing that witch doctors and politicians were all saying that this was never going to happen, and now the airstrip is open. MF has been there, and we'll be able to go back next week and pick up the missionaries in a couple of months and drop off other teachers. Some of them are national teachers, people that I've trained and that MF has found and engaged with to bring the Word of God to different closed areas that were formerly inaccessible to the gospel. So that was my week. My weeks are not all like that, but this was an incredibly encouraging week. It was extremely tiring, but it was also really, really encouraging, just to feel like you're in the fight. I think that story was longer than I intended it to be. I hope that's okay. I hope it's encouraging to you. Yeah, trying to focus on where I want to go next. I want to thank Nancy for the opportunity to do this. This has really, really been encouraging for me. I was reading The Mind of the Missionary at the time. Just had started the first couple chapters, and then Nancy's request came through. And so I was like, I was really impacted by what I was reading. I found it to be an incredibly insightful book about the work that we were doing. Even though I am a missionary, I hadn't spent a whole lot of time reading missionary books. You heard the stories, and I've read a few biographies, but a book that summarizes it this well, and was able to put into words a lot of the experiences that we have had over the years. There's very little that I've found in there that I can't relate to, as far as stress levels, joys, sorrows relating to a home front. All those things are very true. And so I was encouraged as a missionary to find out what my mind was thinking, as the mind of the missionary. And I was also encouraged that there are people who are preparing for the mission field that are reading that, because the perspective is very real. One of the things that I wanted to address was this quote by Hudson Taylor in the book, on page 178. And it says, Hudson Taylor paints an honest picture of the task by saying the work of a true missionary is work indeed, often very monotonous, apparently not very successful, and carried on through great and varied but unceasing difficulties. I shared with you a little bit about the difficulties that we face, even just living in the city, the logistics, being away from home, seeing life continue in the US, not seeing your friends and family for 2 to 4 years at a time, writing prayer letters in the hope that people engage with what you're doing, prayerfully engage with what you're doing, support you financially so you can keep going. Stresses of driving through the city, being stopped by corrupt police officers who want your money. There's just a lot of things that make living here a real challenge. It can be hard to stay spiritually healthy in this environment. And even through the 5 years that we've been here, in the different seasons, or the seasons in ministry even before, it's always been a challenge, and it's very dynamic. It's never consistent. There are times, obviously, when you're feeling very encouraged and you're very engaged in reading God's word. You're praying, you're worshiping on regular basis. And these things are great for the soul. And then there are times where you seem to be doing those same things, yet it's not yielding the same result of joy and peace in your life. And we've noticed that quite a bit. Consistency is key. Keep doing it. Keep praying. Keep searching the Word of God, and keep looking for those fellow believers who maybe are at a different spot than you are, and engage with them, and commune with them. And that has kept us in a good spot with the Lord on that. So yeah, we're here. We need to hear the stories about the real struggles and joys of missions work, because these kind of stories have power to improve our missiology. Unless we're honest about the challenges missionaries face, we don't find realistic solutions. But if we are forthright about what the job requires, we'll stand a better chance of attracting the right people and preparing them adequately for long-term service, rather than sending them home early, disillusioned and depressed. That could be difficult. So how do you prepare for the mission field? And so maybe how we got here is that my parents were missionaries. I grew up in Belgium. My mom's from the US. My dad is Dutch native, and they met on the mission field, and they decided to go to Belgium. Very Western country, very dark place. Light of the gospel is hard to find, and only shines bright in those small communities where you still have those pockets of Christians that have found Jesus. And it's a difficult place. And I grew up as a missionary kid there in those circumstances. And I knew that if the Lord was calling me to be a missionary, I would know. And for many years, I didn't particularly feel that calling. I would want to work in the church. I wanted to serve him, and I wanted to be a pilot. Those things I knew. And little by little, the Lord changed my heart. I pursued aviation in different ways. The Lord closed those doors, and then he opened the door for me to go to Moody Bible Institute. They have a campus in Spokane, Washington, where they teach aviation for missionary aviators. And it was aviation and Bible and the technical combined. And at that point, did I not only have no other options, but I was also very interested in the combination of those things. At that time, I did not feel like I was going to go become a missionary pilot. As we were there, continuing to work in the church, meeting more missionary pilots, just praying through the Lord providing for this education and seeing all the pieces come together, and it's just very obvious how the Lord was leading in that direction. I met Nicole there, and she had a missional heart. She did want to come to Africa and serve as a missionary, and as we grew together spiritually and continued to pursue what God had for us in the future, MAF was a very clear direction that he wanted us to go. It's been a really awesome journey for us, and we really feel that this is what has brought us closer together. This is what's brought us closer to the Lord. We have learned to trust him in so many ways. We have learned to depend on him in challenging times when infrastructure falls apart and there's no one left to rely on. And we're very thankful for that, for the opportunity to be here. Because I didn't always want to be a missionary, I still struggle, and I look on the outside and I see what people are doing in the US and where our friends are currently at and what they're doing and what activities their kids are engaged in. And our friend groups, their kids are growing together and forming their friend groups, and they're continuing to grow in the Lord. And at times it's certainly hard not to feel like you're missing out. Because it's not like you stay connected like that. It seems like in a world where you have Facebook and all these other things, those are not the things that connect you. And so that's a real challenge. And I wanted to develop as well. I wanted to develop in this industry. I wanted to develop in aviation, and I was wondering, how was I going to do that if I was just flying small planes in undeveloped area? And so that's been a challenge for us, I think, especially as I look and pray for God, what do you keep having in the future? And I wanted to share some of the best advice that I've ever gotten with you as I was entering MAF and looking at, okay, what do I want my future to look like? How do I want to lead? I asked one of our VPs at the time, so what are the kind of the things you recommend for somebody to do as they grow in their environment? And he heard my heart. He didn't hear my question. He heard my heart. And he said, you know what I need you to do? I need you to focus on who you want to be, not what you want to do. And those are the kind of things that have stuck with me. Every time I wonder about the value of what I'm doing, is I can tell, because my joy starts to diminish because I'm focusing on how well I'm doing what I'm doing, which is fine. But then really what I need to be focusing on is, who do I want to be and who does the Lord want me to be? And am I in connection with him, growing and growing in his love and his character each and every day? And as I'm doing that, I realize I'm getting better at the other things that I'm doing. Those are the big questions when you're here in when we're here in Africa, where it's very difficult to build connections with the nationals. There are after 5 years, there are a few relationships where we really feel like these are friends. And those have been hard work to get to. You always stand out. Language is always a challenge. There's no such thing as feeling like you have mastered the language, especially in a place where if you've mastered one, well, you probably won't master it. You're starting to become somewhat proficient in one, then there's always a second or third heart language that they'll switch to. And relationships are built off of heart languages, especially in the beginning. When we sat in language school, we had about seven doctors in classes, and I had 3 or 4 other educators, and I was a pilot, and we're all trying to speak a language that we're just learning. And it doesn't matter how many years you've studied and what level of grades and scientific knowledge you have and how you've impressed educators around the world and your community around the world with your accomplishments. As soon as you open your mouth in a language that you are learning, you sound like a 2-year-old. And it's a very humbling experience. And so when you get here, you feel like you miss out on a lot of opportunities, even the opportunities for which you came. You feel like you could miss out on an opportunity to share the gospel in their heart language. Like I said, we had a lot of water problems, and went out my gate one time, and I found a group of guys digging a water line. And I said, "Hey, what are we doing? We're digging up a water line. We're trying to get your house water, and they're hoping to get something out of it. But hey, I'm okay with that. If you can get me water, I'm happy to contribute." And so we hook to one water line. We find water. It's flowing, and we're all excited and happy about that. They say, "Well, you need to go get some beer so we can pour it into the ground for the ancestors because they're giving you water." And so I try to use that as an opportunity. It wasn't in French because this particular group of workers weren't educated, so they spoke Lingala. I was learning the language at the time, and I said, "This is my opportunity to share with them about what the ancestors would say. What if they had a chance to talk and tell them who they should listen to and who they should worship?" And it was such a difficult experience for me to share with them about how much Jesus loved them, who God is, how to relate to him. And at the end of that, I did my very, very best, and I walked away, and it was very disappointing because there was no other opportunity to see those guys again. And I don't know what the opportunity was that they would have. So going back to what I was saying about building relationships and even focusing on who you want to be in the midst of not being able to express yourself, not being able to even do what you came here to do, that could be very discouraging. But if you can stay focused on being who the Lord wants you to be and being where the Lord wants you to be at the time, that tends to be more encouraging and carry you through some of the hard times because you're a loved child of God, and there's incredible things that he wants to teach you along the way. And it is just incredible to know that he might use you for something that could change or bring eternal life to someone else, with all the faults and all the challenges of overcoming language barriers, cultural barriers, and living in a place that is isolating in many ways. So I hope that's an encouragement to you as well. These are some of the things that we have learned. We could talk about this for a very long time. Stories are endless, but I'd like to keep it there. I really hope that you guys are enjoying the class, enjoying reading the book, that it is building excitement, that you're hearing the Lord's invitation, no matter where you're at or no matter where he's calling you to continue to pursue him and what he has for you, to go headstrong into the experiences and challenges that he's willing to walk with you through, to turn you into someone that's more like himself, and communes better with him. So have a great day, have a great class, and take care.